In episode 9 of Wistoria, Wand and Sword, Will finds himself in the dungeon with the top three students at Regarden Magical Academy, as well as Sion and Colette. But this week-long, field-intensive survival exercise is proving to be more of a challenge for Will than he originally thought, as he struggles to stand out. Can Will help his team succeed, or even survive, as they take on the monsters thriving in the dungeon? Let's find out as we dive into episode 9, called Praxis Begins. In episode 9, the all-student Praxis begins, and Will's team takes off running into the dungeon. As the team runs towards the edge of a cliff, Lihana asks for Wignall, the Wonder Elf's assistance. Wignall pushes all of his teammates over the cliff's edge with a gust of wind, and as they fall, he gently catches his teammates with another gust of wind. Everyone manages to land on their feet except Will, who ends up landing on his face. Colette comes to check on Will, and although he's fine, the two don't get a chance to catch their breath, as a large swarm of ant monsters called Crimson Ants appear right behind them, startling the pair. Will grabs his sword and readies himself, fully prepared to be his team's shield in this battle. But Wignall, seeing this, stops Will and tells him not to bother attacking the Crimson Ants since they have Lihana on their team. And her family line is made up of knights, and they have a really strong reputation. Lihana then, in a bolt of lightning, speeds past her teammates to take out all of the Crimson Ants with a lightning enchantment. As Wignall continues to explain that Lihana specializes in close quarters combat and is unique among mages. And Lihana, having defeated all of the Crimson Ants and wanting to be at the top of all of the students in the Praxis exam, tells the others to keep moving. As the battles of the Praxis exam start taking off, we are redirected to Regarden Magical Academy, prior to the Praxis, where Will and Professor Werkner are discussing magic. Werkner asks Will what the most vital magic to have in the dungeon is, before immediately giving him the answer. The most vital magic to have in the dungeon is Search Magic, which is a common spell that detects enemies and abnormalities. With this information, we are thrown back into the dungeon, where Will and his team are fighting nonstop against more Crimson Ants. Will finds himself caught off guard and flanked by a Crimson Ant. But shockingly enough, Julius, the ice wielder, steps in and saves Will, before going back to his usual rude antics and calling Will dead weight. Will starts to wonder if he's too slow for this level of dungeon battle, but then he remembers that all of his teammates have the search spell, which allows them to detect a broader range than natural senses can. That doesn't change the fact for Will that due to him not having this search ability, his teammates will outpace him and get to all of the monsters before he has a chance to. Will is almost immediately proven right. Just as he was thinking this, Wignall, the Wonder Elf, let out a wind spell that surrounded all of his teammates, causing a tornado-like spinning all around and clearing out every remaining Crimson Ant in the team's immediate area. With the second swarm of Crimson Ants defeated, Wignall addresses Will, calling him more of a burden than he originally expected. Wignall even begins to question Lihana's judgment, since Will has yet to prove himself useful to anyone. Lihana retorts by saying that Will has not had a chance to prove himself yet, and that the team will find him more useful once they encounter an over level 5 enemy. Probably. That probably shot daggers through Will, as that probably coming from Lihana sent waves of doubt in the amount of faith she has through Will. Julius, seeing an opportunity to pick at Will, calls him a dimwit and says he knew Will would be no help. Will, taking a moment to look around at all of the random Crimson Ant bits scattered across the dungeon floor, takes this time to explain to us that monsters that have fallen will leave behind traces of magic. Mages can absorb these traces of magic into their wands, having their wands serve as a running record of the number of targets they've taken out in order to award them class credits accordingly. Since Will does not have a wand, he has to bring back physical monster remains to obtain his credits, slowing down his journey through the dungeon. As Will stops to get as many monster bits as he can, he vows that he will, in some way, be helpful to his team. But as they make their way further and further into the dungeon, and Will sees just what his team is capable of, he begins to feel like their pack animal. As the opening day of the Praxis exam concludes, Lihanna suggests that the team take a break. Julius immediately complains, as usual, suggesting that the location that they are all stopping in is not safe. Wignall, ever prepared, decides to place up a wall of flames in order to deter monsters and make everyone feel safe enough to rest. Will and Colette discuss how this is elven illusion magic, and although the flames can't hurt them, the monsters are still cautious of them and keep their distance from the flames. Now that everyone is starting to relax, Lihanna asks Will to pass out the food that he's holding for everyone, and as Will begins to hand out everyone's food, Wignall the Wonder Elf tells Will to place his food on the ground and to not come any closer to him. Wignall explains to Will that only people that elves deem worthy can touch them, and he does not want to accidentally make contact with Will. Colette, always on Will's behalf, begins to protest and suggests that as teammates, Wignall needs to lighten up. However, Wignall does not budge and even goes on to explain that the only person in their party that he deems worthy is Lihanna Owenshouse. Will, not wanting to cause more issues, tells Colette that everything is okay. He reminds her that elven culture is different from their culture and even says that he is not offended. But looking at Will, it's written all over his face that he's a little dejected. This is where we learn that elves, like dwarves, also came from a completely different world. Unlike the dwarves, however, the elves are gifted magic users with a superiority complex, and they are highly revered in this world. Due to their massive power, the Elven Queen even sits at the head of one of the Magiavander factions. While the team rests, Lihanna decides to use this time to go over their game plan. Lihanna explains that the team's goal is to defeat the floorkeeper of the 10th floor, known as the Luminous Nabarus, which is the monster with the highest credit count on the entire floor, a 110 credit beast. Lihanna wants the tower to acknowledge their skills, and to her, this is the way to do it. Because of this, the team endeavors to ignore as many monsters as possible on their way to the 10th floor floorkeeper in order to conserve energy for their big fight. Will seems nervous but ready to face the 10th floor floorkeeper. As the plan takes shape, the scene shifts to another spot within the dungeon, where two unknown men are surrounded by dissected bodies of multiple types of dungeon monsters. As the hooded man approaches the other man that he is with, the hooded man calls him Headless and asks what he's up to. He asks Headless if he slaughtered the guys upstairs, at which point Headless throws two severed heads out from in front of him. As we get a closer look at Headless, it is clear that he is indeed headless. But anyway, Headless responds to the man that he's with, letting him know that he gave the men upstairs a taste of hell, before we're taken back to Will and his team. As Will's team has made their way to the 10th floor, all they can see in all directions are slain monsters. Due to taking the fastest route to the 10th floor, they are certain that no other team has passed them, but no one can wrap their mind around what could have caused so much death and destruction. As Will takes a moment to examine the slain monsters, he notices that he cannot sense any evidence of magic being used on the monsters. They were torn apart by force. Before Will can investigate further, Lihanna notes that their target's lair is very close and asks everyone to prepare themselves. The team makes their way closer to the monster's lair, at this point prepared for anything that comes their way. Or at least they thought they were. But everyone was taken aback as they, without warning, came across the mangled body of the 10th floor floorkeeper. Lihanna, taking charge, tells everyone to immediately cast search, as they are all starting to realize that this floorkeeper was just killed moments ago. Everyone is frantic, as no one knows how this is even possible or who would have the power to walk up and just kill a floorkeeper. It's at this point that we flash back to Will, talking to Professor Werkner in class from before the Praxis. where they were discussing the search spell. Previously, Werkner explained that the search magic is the most vital magic to have in a dungeon, as it's a spell that detects enemies and abnormalities. Werkner at this point begins to elaborate on this, saying that search is in fact an all-purpose spell, but it is not all-powerful. It has a hard time detecting clever traps and any really good mages that can use hide to cloak themselves. Werkner also lets Will know during the session that there is a type of monster that can evade search magic. Will, remembering this conversation with Werkner while he's in the dungeon, takes a moment and looks up. High up above, Will manages to spot the monster that did this damage. He warns his teammates, but before anyone can move, the monster attacks and Will steps in to protect his team. The monster's attack causes Will to be thrown across the dungeon before the monster appears behind Wignall as if from nowhere. Before Wignall even registers that the monster was behind him, he was sent flying across the dungeon floor too. All of the remaining mages on the team ready their attacks, but they aren't fast enough. The monster thrusts its fist into the ground, causing a massive collapse of the ground below everyone. The entire team, unsteady and unprepared, begin to fall through the floor, and as they are falling, Will looks up to see Wignall's unconscious and falling as well. Will jumps to try to reach Wignall before Wignall dies in the collapse, and Will manages to catch him and roll them both to safety. Or I guess I should say that at least they aren't in immediate danger. As Will looks over Wignall to make sure that he's all right, he sees that Wignall took a lot of damage to his left arm. However, the bigger issues are the fact that the team has been split up at this point, and they fell to the 11th floor, which is not a designated floor and is outside of Academy territory, so no one will know to look for them there. In the midst of this chaotic scene, Wignall, previously knocked out by the monster, is having a nightmare where the Elf Queen is telling Wignall that he's a disgrace to his people and that they have no need for him. In this dream, the Elf Queen then cuts off Wignall's left arm, seemingly merging his dream and the reality he ends up waking up to, with his arm being completely shattered. As Wignall wakes up, he sees that Will has just slain a massive snake monster to keep Wignall safe while he was unconscious. Will, having slain the monster and happy to see that Wignall is woken up, runs over to him to check on him. As Will reaches out to help Wignall up, Wignall slaps his hand away, yelling at Will not to touch him. Will lets Wignall know that he just wants to help, but Wignall, unwavering, tells Will that he will treat his own injuries. With Wignall trying to get his arm taken care of, Will begins to look around and assess their situation, noting that they have lost almost all of their gear and have about 1 day's worth of food. This means that if they cannot find their way off the 11th floor by that time, there's a high likelihood that they will not make it out at all. After coming to this conclusion, Will lets Wignall know that they should focus their efforts on finding their party. Wignall wants to stay still and wait for help, but Will assures him that if they do that, they will die. While Will and Wignall try to sort out their next steps, we flash over to the base camp, where Professor Werkner is trying to find out what's going on in the dungeon. Professor Eliza, protecting students on the 8th floor, lets Werkner know that there was a monster stampede that somehow penetrated their base camp, and the other professors that were there with her have been killed, and their heads have been twisted off. Werkner is mortified, and he tries to find out who is orchestrating this attack on the students. Professor Edward, seeing Werkner trying to figure it all out in his head, runs over and tells Werkner that they will be going deeper into the dungeon to see where they can help. Speaking of needing help, we find ourselves back with Will, Kiki, and Wignall, walking through the dungeon to try to find their teammates. Wignall is frantically using search every time he feels uneasy. But Will tells Wignall he probably shouldn't be using it so much since he could easily tire himself out. And as Wignall lashes out at Will, you can tell that he is truly terrified being trapped on the 11th floor of the dungeon. Will tries to calm Wignall and suggests to him that they can share the responsibility of keeping an eye out so that Wignall can conserve his magic. Wignall, a bit confused by Will's calm demeanor through this whole experience, asks Will how he can be so calm in a situation like this. And Will, with a big smile on his face, lets Wignall know that he's just used to being in the dungeons since the only way for him to obtain credits is by force. Will continues, letting Wignall know that he has been stranded on different floors of the dungeon many times, and there isn't much that he hasn't studied or tried in the dungeons. Before the conversation can continue, Kiki lets out a scream, letting Will know that danger is approaching. Will and Wignall begin to prepare themselves, and as they do, they find themselves surrounded within seconds by massive monsters called Demon Spirit Swine Gurgessa. Due to how many Gurgessa appeared, Will determined that their only way out is to fight their way through the beasts. As Will begins to slice his way through the Gurgessa, one after the other, Wignall watches him, in awe of Will's strength and mastery with the sword. In the moment that Wignall was distracted by Will, a Gurgessa appeared right behind Wignall, catching him off guard. Wignall, not knowing what to do, decides that he will hide himself from the monster's line of sight and regroup. With that, Wignall put up a firewall of elven illusion magic, yet it doesn't seem to faze the monster. Will yells out to Wignall, but it's too late as the monster continues its approach, with Wignall being out of options. Wignall, expecting this to be the end of his life, screams out in fear of what's to come. Luckily, Will was able to get to Wignall in time, cutting down the monster and saving Wignall's life. Will, going to check on Wignall to see and make sure he's okay, let Wignall know that Gurgessa don't have eyes, but they have a really good nose, so illusion magic won't work on them. Wignall, having been saved and still slouched on the ground, immediately starts to get down on himself, saying that he's a failure. He tells Will that he is not talented and that the other elves see him as a laggard among his kind. Simply enough, this is where episode 9 of Wistoria Wand and Sword ends. This episode was packed full of action and chaos. I'm still trying to figure out who the two men are that were disposing of professors and potentially causing everything that's happening in the dungeons right now. And how strong must they be to be able to take out multiple Regarden professors? Everything seems to be headed towards more anarchy, and there are only 3 episodes left in this season. I can't wait to see how the Praxis exam continues next week. But what did you think of the episode? Since the team is split up, do you think everybody's going to make it out of the dungeon? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the recap, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you all next week for episode 10.